What's up, YouTube? Welcome to the Counting Wisdom podcast. I think there's a few things that can help us in marriage that I wanted to just talk about on this podcast. I think sometimes really just taking in and analyzing the different problems that you're facing in your marriage, instead of just being so hot-headed sometimes, or just, so ready to tell the other person what you think. Sometimes we do have to, hold back and, not necessarily fight the fight that we want to, in every situation. I wanted to talk a little bit about adultery, cheating, and, our thoughts towards that for those that may be dealing with a spouse that, you suspect is unfaithful, or you just have those thoughts. Well, I think one thing that we have to try to do is, what most Christian books will say is develop that trust within that person. And I'm going to talk about this through a few different perspectives, but one thing I know is that we can't necessarily dwell on those type of thoughts, especially, I think, in the last days, waiting on the rapture and different things like that. As if you're listening to this from my YouTube channel, I make different videos about end times and rapture and just the Bible in general. And so, I think that, there's so much going on in the world that, I think it's so easy to, just constantly be dwelling on, oh, is my spouse cheating on me? Or, are they committing adultery? And, I think it is natural to sort of have those thoughts, but I know my younger self used to, really let my thoughts just, kind of go run rampant. And today in 2023, I try to, not necessarily, at least a little bit, try not to, just constantly be thinking about what could be, and I think that it's so easy to dwell on that. Now, I wanted to offer some perspective on, that whole adultery and just arguing in general for marriage. I think one is that we have to ourselves be walking right with God, and I think that if we have that expectation of, God is not wanting me to commit adultery, I think that, we have to really study that and know ourselves, that what we are doing and what we are portraying to our spouse. I think that what I'm trying to say is, it really comes from the book of Romans, is that we ourselves have to make sure we are, not committing adultery on our spouse while we are so, maybe thinking about our spouse doing that to us, and kind of like, thinking about it from that perspective. I think, having that mindset of, I need to walk right with Jesus Christ myself and, secure my own plane ticket, secure my own seatbelt. And that's one of the biggest things that I would really say is that, I thought of when thinking about kind of the tough topics of marriage, I thought of how when you get married, you sort of sign up for this, even though I don't think we all think about, what entitles marriage, and I think when we get married, we're like sort of surprised because we never thought this far down the line. I think sometimes, especially, for those that do date, maybe, in high school or college, maybe think of, spending time with a person for, a couple weeks or a couple months, but you don't necessarily think years down the line. And so all the different dynamics of marriage, I think, kind of just surprise us, and I would say that just based off of, different material, I haven't necessarily talked to, like a survey of my own of married people, but I have listened to different teachers and ministers on the topic of marriage. And, it seems to me that, sometimes married couples, especially, I hear the notorious like first year marriage can be somewhat difficult. And so, I think one of the biggest things that I try to say and what my goals are, right now is that, hey, I need to walk with Jesus. I need to make sure that I'm walking free from sin. And, the problems that, I think when it gets to like, I don't necessarily have an answer for it in my head, I think that is God's realm, and I think that, when the Bible addresses something, then that God leaves that up to us to either follow it or not follow it. But, when certain problems crop up in marriage, I believe that certain things, maybe unbelievers sometimes have successful marriages, but, from the Christian standpoint, I think some things we have to really leave it over to Jesus to solve these marriage issues, because it's bigger than us. It's a spiritual battle that's going on, that, these marriage problems, don't necessarily, just crop up out of nowhere. I've noticed that it doesn't matter who I'm like either married to or who I'm dating. I notice the same problems consistently. And it's not that these people have the same personality. It's that it's the world. It's the way the world works. It doesn't matter, if I were to marry 10 other people, you're going to see the same problems. And so, I believe that, really sticking close to Jesus is important. Now, okay, so we shouldn't necessarily always be thinking about, adultery. I think that, some things, we have to really leave up to God and, trust God that, he can bring us through problems. Like I was saying, what things that we don't necessarily think about as far as, marriage is concerned, I don't think we always think about the suffering side of marriage. That, sometimes we think of marriage as, I'm going to have sex and, we're going to be holding hands and we're going to be skipping all the time and just laughing and playing. But we don't necessarily think about, the hard side of marriage when we first say I do. And so, I think that sometimes because we have that skewed perspective on marriage, we don't necessarily prepare for these things. And so when talking about the subject of adultery, this is what we signed up for. When you said I do, when you decided to get married, you signed up for the problems of marriage. Not that someone should have to, endure adultery or, not that it's something that is given in every marriage. No, but at the same time, this is what, comes with, you're deciding to get married is, you have to sort of deal with some of these problems that you wouldn't necessarily have to deal with if you were single. Now, if you were single, you would have a different problem, especially if you are, sexually aroused or something like that, and then you get into possibly sinning against God, and so, it's a different trade-off. That's what Paul was saying in 1 Corinthians chapter 7 in regards to being single or being married. And I feel like I want to do a episode on whether someone should get married or not, because, I think it's important to really think about, why you would want to get married in the first place. And I think also thinking about why did you get married, and you can ask yourself the question of, are you that type of person that has this, kind of heaven on earth mindset, of marriage, when, that is not necessarily the whole complete reality. Not that we shouldn't shoot for, hey, having a spouse that never ever thinks about another guy, or, having a spouse that, never ever, even comes off as if, they're not into you or something like that. We should shoot for heaven on earth, but the truth that, Jesus is telling us in the Word of God is that we are not on heaven yet. This is earth, and what I thought of is kind of a movie. It was a movie by Will Smith and his son. I think his name is Jaden Smith. And he does this movie, I think it's called After Earth. And Will Smith kind of describes Earth because Jaden is on the Earth. And he's like, Jaden, this is Earth. Everything here is designed to kill you. And he has this kind of passionate line in the movie where, he's saying this is not our other planet that we're from. And so I guess in the same way, I think sometimes we as people can always have this, it doesn't have to be about marriage. It can be about anything, where we kind of have this ideal, problem-free, kind of idea in our head. And hey, I'm not saying that I never have this idea, Sometimes, hey, I do expect when I say something to my spouse that I hope that she reacts in oh yeah, I'm so glad you said that. Thanks, Ben, for telling me that. But that's not the reality. You're talking to a person that has their own, whole other perspective of the world. And, when you say something to them, they're going to interpret it in their own way. And so going back to, dealing with some of these tough topics of marriage, I think that, definitely getting wisdom on marriage, one thing I realize is that, when I was dating people, and thinking about getting married, I never actually read a book on marriage. One, I never really read the Bible, for one, which could definitely give me a boost in, every area of life. But also, I never read any marriage books. And so I'm like, why am I always having these problems in my relationships? They would last for maybe 3 years or maybe 5 years, and then they would end. And so when I actually, had, got closer to marriage, what I started to do was actually get wisdom on, marriage. And not to say that the wisdom has, made me the perfect spouse or something like that. No. But, I feel like I do at least know more tools about, what it takes to actually, cultivate a good marriage. And I think that it's not crazy for us to think that we can have a good marriage. I think that it's just sometimes it takes work, and sometimes, you have some bad days that are where you're like, oh, I'm, super happy to be married. And then you have other days where you're like, oh man, today is hard, and so I think that, getting wisdom, I think, is so important in marriage, reading books about, or audiobooks. I'm an audiobook kind of person. And so, listening to an audiobook about marriage, I think, is important. But also, really going to God in prayer. I would say, some of, not necessarily maybe from my spouse's perspective, but I know when I inwardly reflect on myself and I think about, progress that I've made, I think that prayer has been one of the biggest helps. And not just like, oh, I prayed this prayer, and so, no, it was God, I believe, that really has, brought me from a long way than what I used to be. Not that I'm where I should be. I still have a ways to go for sure. But when I compare myself to, 20-year-old Ben or 18-year-old Ben, when I was just running around not knowing, anything about, relationships and just trying to wing it, I feel like, after I got baptized and gave my life to Jesus Christ in 2017, I have come from, a ways that only Jesus could do. And so realizing that, we need to change our perspective on marriage, and really change our, kind of outlook of how we view marriage and how it should be, I think is important. And so let me just say a few points about, adultery. Some few things that I think, I will say that I think the whole thought of adultery and, adultery itself, I think has to be dealt with Jesus. I highly recommend the book Marriage on the Rock, which has, a few points about the whole topic of adultery. But, I think obviously, that's one of the biggest things that I think affects people in marriage, where a lot of our problems could stem from is this person faithful to me, And so, I think that, there's a few things that I want to try to say, is that, one, like I'll repeat it again, that I think that, it's a spiritual thing that only, Jesus can really make a huge difference in. And I think especially when we are living for Jesus and, keeping his commandments, I think that guards us from committing adultery, because it's not just, I wonder what they're doing. It's also, we have to guard ourselves when we're out there with, coworkers and, with, just people out in the world. We also need a guard. And the Bible really speaks to that from the perspective of David and from the perspective of Joseph. It's that we have to walk right with Jesus in order to, really have that mindset of, I'm not going to, compromise in that area of life. And then from the perspective of, our spouse and what they do, I think some of this could be addressed when you're first picking someone of like who you're going to marry and date. especially for those who may be listening to this that, haven't gotten married yet, I think definitely, taking some time to diligently, look at who you're marrying for sure. But also, these things we, have to actually, cast our cares, cast our burdens onto the Lord. I think there is a time to address certain things with your spouse, but it's not going to be taken well for sure, and I think just realizing that, we have to have that sober, Christ-like mindset of, we are looking at what are some of our outcomes. If your spouse is cheating on you, are you prepared to forgive them and just move on? If they're unrepentant, if they're just like, hey, I don't care what I'm doing, like, I want to stay married to you, but I want to do this on the side, like, I don't, care. Well, what is your response going to be in that situation, especially when things come to light? What are you prepared to do? And I think, Scripture has a lot to say in this category. I think that, I can't necessarily tell you exactly what a person should do in each situation, just because, there's probably a lot of dynamics that go along with that. But, thinking about what we would want done to us, I think is important in those situations. Jesus did teach, do to others what you would have them do to you. And so, sometimes we have to grapple with, okay, would I want someone to stay with me if I did that? Or would I give them permission to, leave? Or, it really just, depends on the situation. And so maybe I'll come around to this topic. I'm kind of distracted right now. And so I didn't get a chance to say everything that I would want to say. But maybe when I have a different moment, I can share a little bit more about this topic. I also have a podcast actually on this topic again. And if you were to scroll through my videos, you could actually see, some other videos of some of my thoughts on this topic. And so, thanks for checking out my blog or just my vlog, my YouTube channel. I keep it kind of small now. I'm not necessarily doing anything to get a lot of views. I do plan on having a dedicated YouTube channel that's more for the professional views. But right now, I just kind of keep these videos small on, whoever finds these videos, can maybe feel blessed to find them. And so thanks so much for checking out this video. Subscribe if you would like to. Like it if you want to. And I will talk to you on the next one. See ya.